Tonight. For years, the Working Families Party has been a very major player in New York State politics. Its political influence and its organized network has swayed many an election, sometimes helping a preferred Democratic candidate win a primary, or even help that candidate win a general election, thanks to a very professional voter turnout operation. Now, this week, the party suffered a bit of a setback when its for-profit company, Data and Field Services, was shut down as part of a legal settlement, a long-standing battle with former New York City Deputy Mayor Randy Mastro. This company had been responsible for much of the canvassing for signatures to get candidates on the ballot, also GOTV efforts, but party leaders insist this will not hurt them. They are going to be just as strong as before. Joining me to discuss it all is the executive director of the Working Families Party, Dan Cantor. Dan, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so explain to me in the simplest of terms, because this is something that dates back to '09, and it is a little bit of a legal mess. But how are you going to continue to do the grassroots organizing that you have pretty much built your whole reputation on?
Pretty simple. You know, for the first 10 years of the party's existence, we did all of the things that you're describing under the party's own banner. Then we set up this firm to carry it forward. And now we're shutting down the firm, and we'll bring it all back in-house. Obviously, our attorney Mastro feels that he's done won a victory by forcing us to shut it down. You know, he's entitled to his opinion. From our point of view, this is death by litigation, and it was cheaper for us to pay his legal fees than continue paying our own lawyers, because this was just too much of a distraction, and we would much rather you know, get back to the work. So while we're sad to have enriched the partners at Gibson Dunn by $100,000, we're hoping that through the genius of progressive taxation, we can recapture some of that money for the people of the state.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I don't really understand still why you let this go on for so long, and you and I have had many off-camera discussions about it, and we will be more appropriate in our discussions on camera for the viewers. But seriously, why didn't you just settle back in 2010 when you had the chance to just get rid of this whole thing?
You know, we made a judgment that we could prevail in court, and we still think we could have, but we didn't realize how expensive it would turn out to be. So this is not an unfamiliar thing. People get sued, sometimes they settle, and that's what we had to do. So it's like taking off a boot that doesn't fit, right? It's kind of annoying and feel some pain, but then you're like, so now I can get, you know, back to doing the work we want to do. So for us, it's we're not ecstatic about the outcome for sure, but on balance, it's pretty good, and we're very optimistic about what we're going to be able to do in the the work that's ahead of us, both on the issue front and the electoral front. Obviously, we're all very engaged in this, watching and hopefully participating in the space that the Occupy Wall Street movement has opened up for us.
Yeah, you know, it's also interesting.
A bit more interesting.
Sure, yeah, it is, certainly. And I think we'll leave the suit here at this point, although I do want to just note, as a segue, it dogged you for a while, and then the U.S. attorney got involved, and then he didn't find anything, and it was right. Just an ongoing saga. And the governor...
Yeah, it was terribly distracting.
Yes, and the governor kind of used it, if you will, as a wedge against you guys. And he said, I can't take your endorsement as long as you've got this cloud hanging over you. Then he did take your endorsement, but he also made you sign on to his whole whole policy.
The cloud was, right, the cloud was removed, as you pointed out, when the U.S. attorney said there was nothing, there was no there, which we had always said. There really wasn't. So now we're back doing what we always have done. I don't think any of our allies or our opponents will notice much difference. In fact, we feel stronger than ever. Okay,
because it seems like the ideological tide is at least turning in your benefit. Right? Yeah. Because you're seeing all these polls that say, generally speaking, voters support the ideology, right? Greed is bad behind Occupy Wall Street, which is something that you guys have been talking about for a long time. You are a labor-backed party. You come from the left. You run candidates, sometimes against established Democrats in primaries from the left. Are you disappointed, because some people have expressed some disappointment with the governor, who was very fiscally conservative, and now rejects the millionaire's tax, which is the signature thing that's coming out of this whole, if anything's coming out of the movement, that's it.
You know, I'm reading a novel someone gave me called A Fine Balance by an Indian guy I never heard of. He talks about the need to keep a balance between hope and despair. That's what your life is about. I think despair had been winning for a few years, but with Occupy kind of shining a light on this terrible inequality that characterizes American society, this hope is making a bit of a comeback. There was a report, I'm sure you saw, that came out yesterday about how New York has lost more jobs from globalization than any other state, and has gained a lot of jobs too, but the unevenness is what's killing us.
Yep.
So the decline of manufacturing upstate being the signal problem that concerns us. So listen, there are these two twin problems of unemployment on the one hand and inequality on the other. And if Washington isn't going to do anything, and it seems as if the Republicans are going to prevent that, then Albany should act. And from our point of view, taking this money, extending the millionaire's tax, reinstating it, and using those billions of dollars to create jobs, to retain jobs, to do some bridge and infrastructure repair, to do youth jobs, for teachers in the classroom, and so on. All of this is completely worth doing. Go ahead.
1 second. You're basically, there are two things going on here. Extending the millionaire's tax, which was a 3-year PIT, right, personal income tax increase, temporary. It's supposed to sunset at the end of December. That's one thing. The threshold for that is quite low, $250,000 for individuals. Now the Democrats are saying, the Assembly Democrats, Speaker Silver, the Senate Democrats, okay, if you don't like that because it's too low, how about a millionaire's tax that starts at $1 million? Are you okay with that?
Well, I would prefer for it to start a little bit lower down. It's still only 2% or 2.5% of the taxpayers were covered by the current one, right, starting at about $300,000 for a couple. And remember, it's marginal. So if you made $310,000, you only pay that extra 1% on the last $10,000.
Yep.
An extra, $100 a year, $2 a week. So we think there's a lot of room here. Now, the big money, Speaker Silver is correct. The big money is up the food chain, people above $1 million and $5 million. There should be another bracket increase, and maybe one at $10 million. And if we did that, we could have a little bit more shared sacrifice and shared prosperity. That's what we're interested in.
Now, Dan, this is all lovely, but if you can't convince...
We need the Senate to go along.
Well, no, you need the Senate, and you really need the governor.
Need the governor.
If the governor wanted to convince the Senate GOP to do something, you bet your bottom dollar that he would, because he did in the last legislative session. So you endorsed this guy. You endorsed him.
Sure.
So what are you going to do about it?
Well, we're going to push. We're going to try to persuade first the Senate and then the governor that the situation is now so dire. On the unemployment reports last week, 9.5% now in New York.
Yep.
Black community, 16, 17%.
Yep.
Real unemployment's probably 4 or 5% higher than that. I guess our view is you can't, when you're faced with new information, you have to make some new decisions. And the thing that's on our minds is the jobs crisis requires that we take some new and pretty important steps.
Okay.
This is not that radical an idea to say that people earning, these very high salaries could pay a little bit more fair share.
Okay. So if that's the case, you do need to convince the Senate Republicans. True.
Correct.
And you know that there's going to be a massive rebattle, right? A rematch for the majority. You guys have been allied. In the past, you actually endorsed some Republicans a while ago. Nick Spano, for example, down in Westchester. He lost probably because you withdrew your endorsement. You went neutral in that race. So would you consider endorsing Senate Republicans or staying neutral if they... That's
an interesting question.
Okay.
If Senate Republicans actually came out in favor of a more decent and humane society, they would get a very fair hearing, including, reestablishment of the millionaire's tax to create and retain jobs. I think they get a very fair hearing at the Working Families Party.
Because, now, of course, I don't know if they would want it. In this day and age, the Tea Party folks and the conservatives would probably be very unhappy if they saw a Senate Republican running on your line, because, of course, we saw the conservatives withdraw their endorsement from guys who made the switch to support gay marriage. That said, you could make a difference for those people, and I think the Senate Democrats would be angry.
Well, that's possible, but, we've always been an issues-based party. So that's how we make our decisions. Listen, the idea of using the millionaire's tax funds to create and retain jobs is wildly popular, right? This is not some sort of fringe idea. In fact, the reverse is the fringe idea in many respects. So, we are going to fight hard. We realize we're swimming upstream here. Senator Skelos has been, pretty bad on this issue so far. He's in a little tete-a-tete with Alec Baldwin of all people on it on Twitter. What a world! But in any case, you have factories that are idle. You have bridges and roads. This is the real-time impact of this stuff actually matters.
All right. Well,
that's what we're about.
We're going to run out of time, unfortunately. But if that is in fact the case, then why don't you just endorse hydrofracking? Because that's supposed to bring jobs upstate, and it's certainly a return in some sense of the manufacturing base. I'm just baiting you, Dan. I can't help it.
Yeah, you certainly are.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it quite manufacturing. Listen, hydrofracking is a very complicated issue. It's been, you could say in Pennsylvania for sure, it's been a bit of a disaster for people in these communities. So our view is we need to go very slowly here. They've obviously slowed it down even in the last few days. It's not clear to us that while it's true natural gas is the least bad of the fossil fuels, we need to be very clear that people's water, which is life itself, is not going to be impacted poorly, not just in the drilling, but the wastewater also.
Right.
So baiting aside, this is a very complicated issue, and our view is one should take one's time in such situations.
Well, you know what? You can take it, Dan Cantor. You really can. I want to appreciate you for being on the show. I want to thank you very much. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I'll be seeing you in Albany soon, I hope.
I hope so. I'll count on it. What do I do now?